Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and kittens, people all around the world, especially comic book fans, welcome once again to Ask Chuck Dixon, where you ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's not waste another of your precious seconds of life. At Matthew Ledbetter 7818. Hey Chuck, you mentioned one time that you knew Darwyn Cooke in a previous video. I just finished reading his comic adaptations of Richard Stark's Parker series. I was wondering if you had read them or knew about them. Also, what are your thoughts on Darwyn's New Frontier? It's my favorite DC story of all time. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yes, I knew Darwyn Cooke. I can't say I was a friend of his. I didn't go over to his house for dinner. We didn't go on vacations together. Nothing like that. But I think we admired one another professionally. I certainly enjoyed every time I ever got to hang out with Darwyn. Many hours spent sitting in hotel lobbies listening to his stories. He was quite the raconteur, and I was on maybe two panels with him, which were, I wish someone had them on tape because they got a bit raucous. Because Darwyn, like me, had no guard on his mouth when it came to his opinions, and he was always a fun hang, and a good guy, and obviously extraordinarily talented individual. Um, New Frontier, I mean, great stuff. His DC work, all of it was great. The only pity about Darwyn Cooke at DC is I felt they wasted him. They should have just had an edict. Listen to Darwyn. He had great ideas. He really cared. He was really passionate, and he loved these characters, and he basically wanted to save them from a future he saw coming, and that future came, where they basically DC Comics destroyed all of the goodwill that it had with its readers and fans by making catastrophic choices in what to publish and what not to publish. And Darwyn shared my frustration that each of us would pitch ideas that we thought would be, first of all, make money for DC, make money for ourselves. We were comic book professionals after all, but larger than that, to possibly reach out to a new audience, um, take these characters back to their original branding, and all the rest of it. And it fell on deaf ears. I mean, I know why they didn't listen to me. I don't know why they didn't listen to Darwyn, because he was a double threat. He was as good a writer as he was an artist, and he was really good at both. Um, I read his Parker adaptations, and again, he loved the Parker adaptations, so he brought everything to bear on them, and they're excellent. They could not have been in better hands. Was I familiar with the Parker novels before that? Yes, I was. I started reading the Parker novels in the '70s when I discovered them. I was a huge Donald Westlake fan. And if you're a Westlake fan, you have to be a bit of a detective yourself, because he wrote under many pseudonyms. And you kind of sort of, beat the bushes to find out all the books that Westlake wrote under his various different names. And I originally found the Stark novels in paperback. They were not easy to find, because by the time I started looking for them, most of the paperbacks were 10 years old or older. And I began haunting libraries for hardback editions, so I could get to read these stories. And fortunately, they seem to never go out of print now, so they're more readily available to the reading audience. But yeah, I dug them a lot. Big influence on my writing, because Parker is very much an anti-hero. There's not really much to like about him, except his ruthlessness and the fact that he's going up against people far worse than he is. And his only redeeming feature, in my mind, is his loyalty to those who have not betrayed him. That he values loyalty in others and returns it. And it's really his only moral code. Other than that, you get in his way, he'll kill you. If you have something he wants, he'll steal it from you. But Darwyn was a perfect choice for these. He understood these books. He got these books. He understood what they were about. So there you go. Hey, subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, you may not be subscribed. Go back and check. Make sure, because my subscription list keeps going up and down like a yo-yo. And and as I learned from many of you who have kindly contacted me, you've found out that you've been unsubscribed 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Who knows what my subscription list would be like if YouTube could just leave it the hell alone. So anyway, check that out. If not, whatever. We're all friends here. Christopher Cohen, I am wondering what you thought of Stan's subsequent stories with John Romita, including the most immediate revelation that Norm Osborn was the identity of the Green Goblin. Huge assumption that you remained picking up the title after Steve left, of course. I did not buy. I quit buying all Marvels when Steve Ditko left Marvel because I felt I knew him, and it turns out I did. I knew him through his work. I knew the kind of guy he was. I knew he was dedicated to Spider-Man. And in later years found out how much of his life he poured into Spider-Man. There's a lot of Steve Ditko's heart in this character, particularly in the Peter Parker character. And so I just had this sense that somehow my man had been screwed over. So I had a moratorium on Marvel titles for years. And then, got back into it. But yeah, I think when they moved from Ditko to Romita, the book lost a lot. And I'm not blaming Romita. A lot of Romita fans out there, and I'm not going to take anything away from the guy. Tremendous artist. He did terrific work on Spider-Man. But Steve Ditko was the driver on Spider-Man. Stan was just basically the navigator or whatever. He had a subsidiary role on this character. Steve Ditko and Stan Lee were not equal partners in creating this character. Not to take anything away from Stan. Stan humanized these characters. He found the heart of them. He found the emotional center of these characters. And you can't take that away from Stan. He did that. Ditko would probably not have done it on his own. Kirby would probably not have done that on his own on Fantastic Four and the other things they created. But Stan had a way of getting to the core tragic elements of the character that made them relatable and whatever, made them work, made them tick, made them live. So, it was a great collaboration, even though it was an unequal collaboration. So when Ditko leaves, it's a long time before we see any really decent villains created. Ditko created all the best Spider-Man villains. I mean, you can't say otherwise. It seemed like every one he created was gold. One after the other. Sandman, Green Goblin, Electro, all the rest. And I think the story suffered. There was less surprise. There was more cliche. As a reader, I thought it was a big mistake to turn Peter Parker from big nerd and bully bait character into super cool, super hip lounge lizard Peter Parker, because it just didn't seem right. Now there was no contrast between Spider-Man and Peter Parker. They were both cool, in Stan's eyes. Also, Peter Parker being cool indulged Stan in his what he thought was hipster language, how the kids were talking in the 60s and 70s. Nothing could be further from the truth. He was like a cautionary tale to me as a comic book consumer and later creator to never try to make your language of the moment. Don't try to make your dialogue like what the kids are saying right now, because it's going to get real dated real fast. And there's a lot of cringe-worthy stuff there. But yeah, I don't think the book ever had what made it special like it did when Ditko was in charge. And the peculiarities, the surrealistic stuff, the the situations and the way Ditko could turn cliches on their head and turn tropes on their head and seem to have fun doing that. Particularly superhero tropes. We never really saw much of that again. Twin spin. Christopher Cohen again. Did you file the title upon Jerry Conway taking over from Stan? If so, do you think the killing of Norman was a good thing for the title, Peter's evolution? Yeah, I don't think that was a bad idea. Because every once in a while you need a dramatic event, and I think Norman's story was kind of over. So why keep going on with it? I mean, I know what that's like from a creator end, where you've gotten everything out of a subsidiary or ancillary character you can get, and now you just have them hanging around. Now you have to invent reasons why they're in the story, and sometimes the best thing to do is knock them off or eliminate them or send them away. Like the Cunninghams' oldest son in Happy Days, who went away to college and never came back. Was never ever mentioned again. I liked Conway's run because he returned a little bit of that Ditko surprise stuff, a little bit of Ditko having fun with the superhero genre. I particularly remember Spider-Man getting donated the Spider-Mobile, and you thought, oh no, he's going to have like a car drive around in. How's that going to work? And of course, Conway immediately deconstructs that by asking the same questions I was asking as a reader, and it's totally impractical for a Spider-Man to have a car. And it made them very clear in the first story. So Conway had fun with that kind of stuff, and I appreciated that. It was an attempt to return to the kind of things that Ditko was exploring at the time. And the dialogue got a little bit less cringeworthy, a little bit more palatable. And some of the situations he put Spider-Man through were terrific, kept me reading the book, looking forward to it each month. Triple spin. Ooh. What did he win? Nothing. Okay, Christopher Cohen. Do you think it was a mistake that the Spider Office resurrected Norman 2 decades later? Yeah, of course. Of course it was a mistake. You lose all credibility with the readers when you're killing characters and bringing them back. At this point, they kill characters left and right. They either kill characters or they turn them gay or they do something to them that somewhere down the road is going to get reversed. So, the dramatic impact of killing a character that we had with, Norman Osborn, or when I was a kid, Alfred died. These things lose their impact because you don't believe in them anymore. It's like, they're just going to fix it later. They're just going to retcon something in, or invent a new universe, or the multiverse will collapse and explode again, and we'll have a whole new reality. So yeah, it's a terrible idea. And was anybody clamoring from Norman Osborn to come back? I don't think so. No more than they were clamoring for the eldest Cunningham child to come back from state college. Nobody was like, well, where's he? I don't even remember his name. Kian Kurji. You mentioned Cormac McCarthy recently, whom I just started reading. What's your interpretation of Blood Meridian? Many people have different takes. Also, McCarthy has many passages in his books with untranslated Spanish. Do you speak Spanish or any other languages other than English? No, I don't speak any other languages other than English. I took years of German, and I barely remember any of it. I took it in high school. I remember De Marsleuten warteten hinter dem Mond, which means the Martians are hiding behind the moon. So if that situation ever comes up and I'm surrounded by only German language speakers, I'm good. I think I can buy shoes too. I remember that chapter, buying a pair of shoes. Other than that, I'd be completely lost. As far as Blood Meridian goes, what is my take on it? My take is that McCarthy was writing novels, like portrait novels, standard literary type novels for years, and then he sort of turned his attention to genre novels. And I don't even know if the literati realized what he had done here. So he writes a Western, No Country for Old Men. He basically writes a thriller. The Road, it's a post-apocalyptic saga. It's a wonder he didn't get to fantasy or, or pure science fiction. But he begins exploring genres, and Blood Meridian it's a tough read, not because of his language. Some Cormac McCarthy books can be a tough read because of the density of his prose. Blood Meridian isn't one of them. It rips along. It rips along like a beach read, but it's a tough read because it takes you to horrible, ugly, dark places. And what does it all mean? Well, McCarthy was often said that the subconscious is more important than language. In other words, we share something deep inside of ourselves. We share in the human experience, and that's what he was trying to bring out. It's something we all share. Every human being walking this planet shares this. And as his career went on, and you look more into his work, you realize there's a spiritual element there as well. It's not just the subconscious, and maybe that's how he refers to it, but there's a spiritual connection between all of us that we're unaware of. There's a connection to those coming after us, and there's a connection to our ancestors. We share something beyond the real, and that's apparent in a lot of his work. And then for me, I don't know what Cormac McCarthy was thinking his biggest theme was, but to me, McCarthy's recurring theme in so much of his work is the very real nature of evil. That human beings are capable of true, unredeemable evil, and perhaps, as he suggests in No Country for Old Men, it's getting more and more prevalent, and there's no way back. And I think The Road was basically his ultimate statement on that. This is literally the end of the road for humanity, where we all just turn back to our more barbaric, bestial, savage natures, and evil is evil is now the norm. There is no, although I don't want to spoil it, but at the end of the road, at the end of the novel, The Road, there is a glimmer that humanity still survives, and it's our better angels are still in existence. But anyway, heavy topic for a comic book writer, huh? I wish I could understand half of what I just said. Okay, on to the next one. Mattel Jones. I recently read the first Corto Maltese book, Ballad of the Salty Sea by Hugo Pratt. I enjoyed pretty much everything about it. One aspect that stood out to me was Pratt's portrayal of Corto's fellow pilot and steady foil Rasputin. This was a hard-looking, frequently cold-blooded killer, but Pratt adds some vulnerability to the character. At times, maybe as a form of dark humor, where Rasputin bemoans his lack of friends and is frequently very dependent on and seemingly grateful for Corto's help. Can you talk as a writer about the process of creating a multifaceted bad guy like this, and what some of your favorite examples and inspirations are in relation to this? I know you like Highsmith's Ripley, but I was thinking more of supporting roles than leads. This could be from whatever medium left an impression on you. I often refer to the Raymond Burr character in Rear Window. We don't know anything about him except that Jimmy Stewart, spying out of his rear window, suspects that Burr has murdered his wife. And so we form an impression of Burr, that he's this cold-blooded monster. And because we're seeing everything from Stewart's point of view, and largely that point of view is long distance, we make a lot of assumptions. We share Jimmy Stewart's assumptions that this guy is just a bad guy. He's an irredeemably evil person who killed his wife in cold blood for whatever reason, for profit, or out of anger, whatever. And when we finally meet Burr and hear his voice for the first time, and he's in close proximity to Stewart, I know I've described this 100 times, but it still impresses me. He's standing in the foyer of Stewart's apartment, and his face is in shadow. And his first words are, "Why are you doing this to me?" In other words, he sees himself as a victim. And we know he killed his wife. We strongly suspect Stewart is right and he murdered his wife. We're convinced of this by this point. And when he says, "Why are you doing this to me?" Um, just for a few seconds, we have sympathy for him. We put ourselves in his place. He's being persecuted. He's being hunted. I mean, why can't Jimmy Stewart mind his own business? And we really feel for him. He feels hurt. Of course, he takes all that away by trying to strangle a man confined in a wheelchair. But just for those few seconds, this character becomes not a cartoonish, cardboard, two-dimensional bad guy, but he feels real. He really comes to life in our minds. And that's a terrific touch. Others, you talked about supporting roles. Strother Martin and L.Q. Jones and Wild Bunch are, gutter trash, as Robert Ryan refers to them, and they do nothing to convince us otherwise. They're really just horrible. They're a pair of idiots. They're homicidal morons, and probably long in need of a shower. They just look like they smell, and they're just horrible people, and greedy and all the rest of it. But it's the camaraderie between the two that makes them come to life for us. They're really pals, good friends good friends to the point where they'll fight with one another, and they'll get in arguments and then patch it up. It's okay. A particularly memorable argument over who killed one of their innocent victims first and who's going to get the guy's boots. But in those moments, you find them funny and kind of oddly charming. So it's a more nuanced portrayal of the kind of saddle tramps that serve as henchmen in these movies, in westerns. Another one, a western character, Richard Boone. He was the main villain in The Tall T, but he's in charge of these guys holding Randolph Scott and this woman prisoner, and we know that his gang has killed innocent people, including a child. Killed them and dropped them down a well. But he's the leader of a small gang of morons and psychos, including Henry Silva. So you're in for trouble when Henry Silva shows up. Guy's just a reptile. And Boone does his best to ride herd on them, to keep them from indulging in their baser instincts, of murder and rape. So he's like this controlling influence. And he's also intelligent. He's extremely intelligent. And in the end, we kind of like him. And we realize he's been forced by circumstances. This is probably a once proud man who has crossed the line somewhere in the past and realizes he's never going to go back. He's a sinner now, and he will remain a sinner to the day he dies. There's no going back for him to whatever life he led before this. And we get the idea that he's, somewhat, certainly more educated than the rest of the members of his gang. And it's just a tremendously nuanced performance of, that, in a normal Western would just be a guy who is, nasty and fast on the draw. A lot of these things are things I thought about in the creation of Bane. And I think Bane's redeeming feature is that he is, at heart, an innocent. Despite all the horrible things he's done in his life, he sees himself as a victim of fate. This is a guy raised as a child in a prison to serve a life sentence for crimes that wasn't even alive when these crimes were committed. He was born to be in a penitentiary for the rest of his life. And so, in his eyes, and as he often states, he is innocent. He is just reacting to the negative stimuli, around him. So that helps nuance the character, make him more relatable, make him come to life in your mind more, make his motivations clearer, and perhaps make um, him not necessarily scrutable. You're never quite sure how Bane is going to react to things. Um, and also, I like the fact that his only vulnerability, real vulnerability, other than Batman, is women, because he was raised in a prison to adulthood. Women are totally his blind side. He's a super intelligent guy. He's a mastermind. He's a chess player. He beat Ra's al Ghul at chess, but boy, he doesn't understand chicks at all. And that's another thing that I think makes him, relatable, especially to guys, because we're all clueless at heart, I believe. But the thing is, you can have a bad guy who's just a bad guy, and there's no redeeming feature, but you got to really get into it. And one that character that I loathe to this day, and I have a hard time watching the actor in anything, is Obadiah Hakeswell, who appears in the Sharp novels by Bernard Cornwell, and he also appeared on the TV movies, played by Pete Postlethwaite. And he's just a horrible person. He's just awful. There's nothing good about this guy. He's mean, vindictive, cowardly, treacherous. He does anything for his own survival. He can justify anything that he does, and literally says that it's in the scriptures. Whatever he does, torturing people, rape, whatever, it's okay because it was written in the scriptures. And he's just there to give Sharp hell at every opportunity. And so, as long as you paint them vividly enough, and put them through enough changes and present them with enough challenges, you can write a bad guy who is just simply bad. So you don't need any redeeming features. And this guy certainly doesn't have any. Crenshaw FAO. Digging through some comics at Half Price Books, I found some issues of Treasure Chest of Fun and Fact. Just wondering if this was anything you ever ran across. Yeah, these were a Catholic publication, a comic book. I don't remember if they came out weekly or monthly. I never subscribed to them, but I remember I would go to catechism classes and I was going to public school, and my only experience with Catholic school was catechism class. And these would be everywhere, stacks of them, piles of them. They'd be in every desk. And I don't know if the church gave them away free or you had to subscribe to it. Like, in the public school, we subscribed to Weekly Reader. I suspect it was a subscription thing. But there were always copies laying around, and you were welcome to take them home. And I don't remember much about them. I certainly read them because I read every comic book that was put in front of me. I certainly read them, but I can't remember a thing about them. What I do remember, I have the impression that they were kind of forgettable, obviously, because I can't remember anything about them, but also always competently done. And quite frankly, I'm going to look into these. I'm assuming, these were published in the millions of copies, distributed to American Catholic school kids. So they shouldn't be too expensive. I haven't looked yet. But the impression I have coming away from it, you can see from these covers, these were competently done comics. So I'm going to do some more research on this and come back to you. But that's my, scant impressions of Treasure Chest. Sean Danker. Is Wally West the Rodney Dangerfield of comics? He seems to be the most disrespected character in all of comics, where he's constantly being crapped on because it seems like DC in the last couple of decades, because it feels like DC can't seem to resist trying to destroy him as both a hero and a character since Barry's return. Yeah, I mean, they don't know what to do with characters like this, quite frankly. And you've got people in charge who, every character's got a fan base. It might be 10 people, but every character is someone's favorite character. Just as every comic book is some comic shop's #1 selling comic. And Wally West, I liked Wally West when I was a kid, when he was Kid Flash. And I mean, I didn't find him annoying or anything, but I guess they don't know what to do with him, so they crap on him, as you said. Uh, you would think they would come up with a more relevant place for him in the Flash world. I mean, what's wrong with having more than one guy running fast? I mean, during the Mark Waid era, it seemed like there were a dozen speedsters running around the DC universe. So yeah, I don't know why they do these things, and some of it could be fan prejudice. You could have the title handed over to a creative team that doesn't like the character, and they want to trash him. I mean, thank God I was never given Aquaman to write. But I wouldn't want to, because I realized Aquaman has fans. I don't want to disappoint them by doing what I would do to Aquaman. So I'm going to do the right thing and stay away. But some people don't have those instincts. And trust me, amongst writers and editors at DC, there's always been this coterie around characters they don't like. They just, for whatever reason, probably going back to childhood, they just don't like that character. Oh, Sean Danker back again. Do you think there's too many Green Lanterns? Hold on. First of all, hold on. You were supposed to get a twin spin. There you go. You got a twin spin. Got a twin spin. Okay. Do you think there's too many human Green Lanterns? Why does DC treat Hal Jordan like he's a disposable character? Do you think the introduction of the Rainbow Corps and the emotional spectrum added to the Green Lantern world building, or did it end up hurting Green Lantern? I hope to God that the Rainbow Corps isn't a real thing. Is that just like a phrase you're using? Please don't let there be a Rainbow Corps. Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I understood with Guy Gardner and Hal, where basically Guy Gardner was the failed Green Lantern. There's a point to that story. And the point was there can be only one. But now there's a bunch of human Green Lanterns. My understanding of Green Lantern is that there's one for every civilized planet. Every sentient planet has their champion. And when you make more than one, for no reason other than you want more than one, it really doesn't make things better. If you wanted John Stewart to be Green Lantern, you come up with a reason why Hal Jordan has been sidelined. Now, why the Hal Jordan hate? No idea. Again, it's like a personal prejudice amongst these people. But when you start adding more and more to something, you're not making it better. If you pour water into wine, yes, you're making more to drink, but you're not making the wine better. You're not making it stronger. You're not making it more vibrant. You're just creating more liquid. And in the end, you're taking away from the final product, not adding to it. Unless you're Jesus, don't be watering things down and expect them to stay the same. And that's what's, I believe has happened with Green Arrow. Joshua Ignatowski, as the writer of Law Dog, what would you say are the keys to writing a multiverse well? Well, Law Dog traveled from parallel universe to parallel universe, dimension to dimension in his special hopped up muscle car. And largely the series was meant as a way to throw every kind of genre imaginable at Flint Henry, the artist who helped me create Law Dog. And just let's go to the very limit of what of Flint's imagination with this book. And it was just a way to explore those things. And the general overall theme of the book was that a lot of times, if you make efforts to change things, you're only ruining them. And Law Dog comes to the realization at the end of the series that he has not made things better. That his masters, the people that send him out on these missions, they really have no idea what they're doing and no idea of the consequences. And that was largely the theme. I don't often write with a theme, and I didn't start writing a theme, but over the course of writing it, that theme came to me. Now, I wasn't particularly worried about continuity or any of the rest of the things you need to be worried about. I was worried about the central characters. Were they relatable? Were they fun? What kind of crazy adventures could we get them into? And when you can jump from reality to reality, there's no end to the crazy adventures you can have. But you've got to keep those core characters relatable and fun and consistent throughout, which some franchises apparently have a hard time doing. But that's what makes it work. If you're going to send people back in time, you're going to send people to parallel universes, make them the same people throughout. Nothing, they don't change, but everything around them does. And I think that's the fascination of this kind of story. And I have my own experiences with the genre writing the Bad Times books, which featured not only time travel but also parallel universes where history diverged at points. And I had to make my characters relatable and consistent. But unlike Law Dog, I had to worry about continuity and paradoxes and all the things that make my wife believe that I go schizophrenic when I write about time travel. But if you're seriously writing a multiverse story, you got to keep your ducks in a row. You got to keep all of that stuff in line, so you're not creating plot holes. And those are the two important things: not creating plot holes, being consistent in both character and settings and premise and all the rest of that jazz. So, whoa, Joshua gets the twin spin. In your experience working for the Big Two during the time of huge company-wide crossovers and events such as Acts of Vengeance and DC 1 Million, from what you've seen, what was the best way for companies to do those huge crossovers to result in the best stories and least headache for all the writers working on other titles? Which business practices for them provided the most pros and ones provided the most cons? Well, going into those things, you needed a high concept. And you needed the high concept to be malleable enough and easy enough to grasp, not only for the consumer, because you got to market this thing to readers. Like, oh, the superheroes meet, and why? Well, this is why. And you either go, oh, that's stupid, or oh, that's cool. And you're aiming for, oh, that's cool. That's a great reason for them to get together. That's a great challenge for them. That's a great, raison d'etre for them to be, all mixing it up together. And, things like Acts of Vengeance were basically, it was change partners and dance. It was have all the different heroes meet villains they'd never met before. And that was really the gag, the driving gag. And it really wasn't more complicated than that. There was an uber story to it, but it wasn't important. You could read the books apart from one another and enjoy them just as much. And I think that's the best kind of crossover where you can pick and choose. But largely, these crossovers were designed to get retailers to buy more books. So that if you had a crossover and the various issues were numbered, you would follow it, Atlantis Attacks or, whatever, Infinite Ultimate Crisis on, Eternal Earths or whatever you're going to call your crossover, and you're numbering the books. Retailers go, well, I got to do this, and it would lift all boats. They would end up, buying extra copies of Captain Potato Salad because the publisher would say, well, this really, really important event happens in Captain Potato Salad number 379, or the whole thing ends in Captain Potato Salad number 340. So they would have to buy more of those issues, and that was the reason. And it did. It lifted all boats, so that your sales of all the titles would come up closer to the top selling books, which were obviously the tent poles for any of these things. Now, things like 1 million, I've bitched about 1 million enough. I'm not going to do any more. But the mistake 1 million made is that the Uber story was important for some reason, and because of that, and because the Uber story kept changing, and by Uber story I mean the story arc that was supposed to be described across the span of this thing. There was a beginning and middle and end of this epic story, and each book was just a chapter in it. The Uber story was confusing to begin with, and then they kept changing it as we went along. Sometimes you would write your issue, your 1 million issue, and then get a notice that you had to rewrite it because changes had been made to the spine of the through story. And I wasn't the only writer, but I was one of the writers who literally reached a point where I didn't know what I was writing anymore. I didn't even understand what I just wrote, but I'm doing it because you're paying me, and you guys are the boss. But that's not how to do it, because 1 million. The concept was it's the 1 millionth issue of every DC comic. It could have just left it right there. They could have just had that be the concept. This is the DC universe far into the future, but they had to tie it into this story that no one understood and no one remembers. And I think it kind of, it was a successful crossover, but I think it kind of crippled it creatively. Hey, one more thing. I've been recommending movies because you people seem to dig that. We're going to move to the very end of the 70s, 1979. The Great Train Robbery. This was an adaptation of the Michael Crichton novel about the very first train robbery back in Victorian England. And it was adapted by Michael Crichton. He wrote and directed it. And it is perfection, absolute perfection. That period detail is just as painstaking in the movie as it was in Crichton's novel. The cast is absolutely pitch perfect. Sean Connery, Leslie Ann Down, what am I doing? Donald Sutherland, sets, costuming, attitude, language, everything is fantastic. I mean, it's a movie you'll walk away, you'll actually learn something about underworld life in Victorian London, back in the 1850s. And it's also a great, it's a thriller, but there's some terrific comedy moments in it. What am I doing here? There's some terrific comedy moments in it, and it's just grand entertainment. If you've never seen it, I strongly suggest you do. And it's one of Michael Crichton's better books, although I enjoy all his books. It's a standout. The In-Laws. Peter Falk and Alan Arkin are teamed in a comedy movie in which Alan Arkin is a dentist in Manhattan, and Peter Falk plays a CIA agent who may or may not be crazy, but is certainly unscrupulous. and what brings them together is their kids are going to get married in a few days, and they're meeting for the first time. And Arkin is impressed with what a mental patient Peter Falk is, and Peter Falk basically regards Alan Arkin, like a cardboard cutout, until, for whatever contrived reason, Peter Falk needs Arkin to play a part in one of his off-the-books CIA schemes. He's he's on an unauthorized adventure to help out a Central American dictator, and I love this movie. I've watched it a bunch of times, and I actually they're in a diner here on Fifth Avenue, and I actually got to stand with a crowd and watch part of this scene be filmed. In New York, when a crowd forms, you just join it. What are we all looking at? And I was like, oh, there's Peter Falk and Alan Arkin, and a whole bunch of lights and cameras, and so we got to look from across the street through the window at the two of these guys hamming it up, and it's a wild and crazy adventure. It's a lot of fun. These two guys had a really weird chemistry. I wouldn't call it a buddy film because you just get the idea that Arkin never gets around to liking Peter Falk. You're never quite sure what Falk is up to in this whole movie. Is he telling the truth now? Is what we're seeing what we're really seeing? But the standout for me is Richard Libertini as the Central American dictator that Peter Falk is trying to aid for whatever reason. And Libertini just owns the final part of the movie with his insane portrayal. It's a nightmare version of a Banana Republic tyrant that's hysterically funny. So if you've never seen it, I urge you to check out The In-Laws. Hey, if you got questions, suggestions, whatever, pictures of the doggies and kitties, send them to Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com is the most reliable way to reach me. I check it out a number of times each day, and I will certainly not miss your questions, queries, suggestions, and whatever, and recommendations. People were recommending some really cool movies to me recently. So you're returning the favor. Very nice. I like it. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening, liking, subscribing, resubscribing, resubscribing, whatever you did. And I'll see all of you down the road.